Happy Friday. Welcome back to Recoup. Today is Friday, December 12th, 2025. I'm Sweets. This is Sid. This is our Friday weekly check-in where we recap what we've been delivering this past week and plan out the week to come. We'll start it off how we always do in one word, how are you feeling today? And in one sentence, what do you need today?
In one word, I'm cold. It's chilly down here. So I got like a little chill. In one sentence, what do I need today? I need clarity on end of year progress. We had set some milestones last week, but then I know that the scope has been expanding, and so I want to just reframe the scope, rediscuss that to see if we're on the same, if the scope is the same, or if we need to reassess expectations.
You were feeling cold last week. Sounds like you need to turn up the thermostat with that.
Yeah, dude. I don't know what it is. Like maybe like the heat is not hitting in here or something. All right, what about you?
I'm feeling relieved, and I need perseverance in the year-end goals.
Nice.
Ideally not adding new things, and just like I think your goal, restating it and continuing to focus on it. Do we want to start there on the year-end goal and work backwards in anything that might have been merged this week?
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to state them?
My year-end goal was one extra enterprise client, and then your year-end goal was you had 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. You can state yours.
It is maybe 4. MCP server, X402, API keys, SMS client, and email.
Okay.
The first 3 are all kind of tied together in a big back-end architectural migration.
Yeah.
And then the 2 customer-facing updates would be SMS client and email client.
Cool.
Does that match what you were thinking that my goals were?
Yeah.
And yours has already been achieved, so it's just me building out tech to catch up to you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can add it again. Well, let's recalibrate to see if we should drop some of yours and add some to mine. How you feeling? What was shipped? And how many days do we have left by the end of the month? Is the 5 things on your plate realistic in the current trajectory?
Where we are currently at, I'll start. We'll start with X402, and then we'll go through. So X402, we still only have one endpoint that is built on X402, and it is our image generation. We consistently are in the top 40. The revenue sometimes loads in here, sometimes does not, but we're consistently in the top 40 services globally on a daily basis of us using X402 in the background. Where this ideally gets to by the end of the year is at least everything that we want to charge credits for flow through X402 in the background. And if someone does not have enough credits, we are failing the API endpoint so that people aren't getting to 0. Questions or comments on X402 before I go to MCP?
Continue.
So for MCP, I go to Cloudflare's Playground. They have playground.ai.cloudflare.com. This just gives me an external place where I can plug in the MCP URL without me doing a whole lot of hard work. This is easy. Like, will a general tool that everybody builds on, which is Cloudflare, can they read our MCP server? So we've got Recoup API.vercel.app /MCP. If you add this, it pulls in everything that's in our MCP server right now. So we've got 15 tools. I think we still have like 40 more tools or 30 more tools. So there's still quite a bit for me to move over. But all of these have been tested and they work in a generic MCP client like this. I've also tested them inside of Cursor. So our MCP server is working. We just need to keep moving stuff over. This, I feel, is a lower priority, especially as our enterprise customer did not say that they want or that they're going to build on this. So this is probably out of all of them, one of the lower priorities. I think the highest priority that I'm currently working on are API. Any questions or comments on MCP service before I move on to API keys?
Continue.
API keys are the last recoup.com. So if you go on to our, oh yeah, it's docs. That's why I was giving you weird stuff. If you go to getting started, we now have this API key section. If you click on the step 1 of navigate, in the tab right to where API keys are. And so in here, it will then load my API keys. We don't store API keys, so there's no way to access them afterwards. But if you want to make a new API key, you just say, happy Friday. I can create that API key. Here's my key. I only get to copy it once. I copy it, and then it's stored in Supabase. I can delete it. So we have API keys. Where I need to start going now is what I'm working on now is right now this API to give me my API keys, you pass in an account ID, so it's easy to spoof. What I want to do is remove API keys and use the authentication that we get with Privy. Privy has auth tokens that we can pass from the client to the API server. That way we start to update all of our API, and starting with this one because this is the management of further authentication. But removing the account ID credential, which anybody could copy and paste in, replacing that with you have to either provide us an API key, which is sensitive, or you log into our client with Privy, and then we use auth tokens, but much more secure accessing of information. Once our API keys are updated to use that, then updating all of our endpoints to use API keys instead of account ID. That is, I think, the number one change because that is blocking us from sending docs to our enterprise customer. So this is what I'm actively working on. Ideally, at the end of today, this page is using Privy auth tokens. So once we're using Privy auth tokens here, then updating probably then focusing super specifically on what's blocking us from sending an update to the enterprise client. And I think that is update the chat endpoint for the feedback that we told them of. Let's focus on the chat endpoint, get rid of the account ID required param, update the docs to say that you use API key. Then we send an update to our enterprise customer, and then I can continue this migration or stop there once chat is updated. So that way I can really hyper focus on get SMS updated to work and get email client to work. And then whatever email client and SMS client need, bring those changes over to the new repo, wrap them in MCP, add X402, but deprioritize the bigger architectural migration and try to get these last customer facing things out so that I don't overspend my time on back-end architectural changes outside of what's needed. So condensing that into what I think, any questions on API keys before I talk about what I think I should focus on?
No, continue.
So where I think my focuses should be is number one, Privy auth keys, get API keys working for the API key endpoint, then for the chat endpoint. So the goal is chat endpoint uses API keys. Goal 2 is SMS or email, and then goal 3 is SMS or email. Question I'll throw to you is which should I prioritize as number 2? Which one is more important, SMS or email as the first client I build once we send an update to our enterprise client saying, here's the chat endpoint, you can build on this. Which client is more important to build out first?
Great question. Question before I answer the question. In the current scenario, if you don't You use an API key. If you do use an API key,
Mhm.
what knowledge base, if any, is the chat using?
With the API key, the knowledge base is going to be this account that you're currently signed in with. So it will be this custom instructions, this job title, this name, and this company. And you also provide an artist ID, which right now is required. So you would also provide one of these artists, and that would then include the artist that you're providing.
Got it. So you need to provide an artist ID along with the account ID. Can the account ID be an organization?
That's a great question. I currently know. I do think that that is an important update for the enterprise customer to move forward. They're waiting for us to give them an API key as well. So, that's a great question. If I'm in an organization, should I only have when I come to API keys? Should my API keys just be for the organization? Or do we want people that are in organization to manage two sets of API keys, one for the organization that they're in and one for their personal account, which would be what we're looking at right now?
In my opinion, we are building this specifically for an organization right now. Eventually, we may find another use case for it. But as of today, there is not a customer who would use this person, who would benefit more from using it personally rather than through the org.
Mhm.
Now, with that being said, if it's through an org account, we run into some fun things because, well, no, because then you would, in this scenario, whether it's an org account or not, it still needs an artist ID, correct?
The API key itself does not need an artist ID. The requests to the chat endpoints do require an artist ID currently.
But not with orgs. I think I updated that.
If you updated it, then
I may have not. I don't know. We have to double check that. I guess, okay, so I'm playing this out because the reason why I'm asking these questions is because let's talk about if there is something that we need to consider that needs to be thought through before SMS or email in this new architecture with org API keys.
Mhm.
Okay, I am a customer who receives an email from Recoup. I then reply back to the email and say, let's say that the email from Recoup was because like it was a selected artist. So in that scenario, that chat, if I reply back, will have an artist selected, right? Because the task was created within an artist selected, right?
Correct.
Cool. So in that scenario, we're currently moving forward. Nothing needs to be changed. That's great. Now let's say the user sets up a task. The org sets up a task with no artist attached. In this scenario, let me give you the example. They use their API key to tag chat in Space Heater, and the user says, "How is Wiz Khalifa doing?" in Space Heater. The current architecture would require them to also go into Recoup to get the artist account ID. Like I guess that's my question mark is if a user is in Space Heater and asks a question about an artist, how will it know which artist to pull from or create tasks around or pull files from? Like, is that the missing piece that we're missing in order to like make the experience good for customers?
Yes, that piece is missing. How I suggest we handle it is prioritize one of the clients, and then you and I test those cases before we tell the customer about it, and work backwards from that exact case of, first, the chat needs to be able to reply when I send it an email. Second, does it know what artist I'm talking about? If no, what tools are missing? Let's backfill those in smaller iterations. Instead of trying to prepare the tools first before doing a client, I recommend get the client in ASAP, and then you and I test the client until we feel this is good enough to share with our customers, filling in the missing pieces, like which artist is selected after getting the initial client up and running.
So what I'll do is, this is what I want to do. You pick SMS or email. It doesn't matter to me. Both of them are equal value, not equal value, but like SMS is net new. So if like your curiosity wants net new, I'll go there. Email is going to be quicker probably, and not net new. But it will open up a world of new fun when it comes to Recoup handling the entire thread. So let's start. I would start there because those are good testing grounds, and whatever you think is more valuable. But I think the next thing also that we need to do is, like, I like what you said about you can test it in Cursor. So if we pretend Cursor is Space Heater, and we also use that as like a customer experience, platform of like, if I say in Cursor, how is Wiz Khalifa doing? Like that's what will happen in Space Heater. And then what needs to happen so that Cursor calls the chat and the chat knows how to call the artist Wiz Khalifa, because we'll use Cursor as a testing ground, and then whatever you choose SMS wise, but I think both of those things like need to have this ability for the user to, without the user themselves providing the account ID, the chat being able to know what accounts are associated with this org,
Mhm.
and to infer context, and auto fill in the account ID based on that.
Excellent. I agree. So number one, API chat, get that with API keys. Number two, update the API key framework to be around organizations as the priority, with falling back to personal if someone's not in an organization. Three, I'm going to do the email client. I agree. It's going to be a faster setup. And then if we get email done, shift focus to SMS.
Correct. And also, like I said, test on Cursor. That I love the prompt, like org API is in Cursor, MCP, or whatever we're using in Cursor to connect to. Oh, because you're saying Cursor is just MPCP. It's not to the API chat.
It's not using our system prompt, but I do agree with you. It's a great testing ground, because that is, without our system prompts, how do our tools work being chained together? Because something I've observed moving things over to the MCP server is we'll say stuff like, do not ask the customer for this, get it from the system prompt. So it's assuming the system prompt includes stuff like account ID, active artist. And if someone's using our MCP, they won't have our system prompt. And so we should not be hard coding, get this from the system prompt in tools that are being accessed via an MCP server. So I think that your ultimate test is, does this work in Cursor? Because if it works in Cursor, it works in any, it doesn't depend on our system prompts, which makes it more modularly able to be accessed from any AI agent.
Yeah. And talking through like what we had discussed, because is there a way to also include prompts in the tool? I mean, the tools themselves, like, which then become subagents. But the question of like, do we need to give Cursor, or or how can the customer outside of the Recoup client and outside of, like you said, our system prompt or our system prompt, still get a valid, great experience, and an intelligent agent that can still do the same shit as Recoup, like, or more. So yeah, I think we're on the same path. Good, cool.
Tossing it over to you. I'm clear. Anything you want to talk about of what you've delivered or what you're working on next week?
Yeah. You ready for this, bruh?
Breaking news is coming up on the screen.
Breaking news. All right. So first, I need to. I think good progress actually. I need to ship the build error fix, and then once I do, I'll let you know, and I'll merge that. But what I did on the train, fun. All right. So I want to first show you my new and improved vibe. Can you see my screen?
Yep, we see cursor coming over the infinite mirror.
Okay, cool. So this is my recoupable directory. Inside, I have customers, marketing, product, and records. Inside customers, I have each customer. And if you go into it, I have all the transcripts that I'm going to be putting and everything. So like literally, like, it's going to be able to know everything about our customers, all the transcripts we're having, like all of that shit. Marketing, I'm putting like all of our banners, all of our shit, right? Boom. Like, then records, I put Gatsby in there. I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in Gatsby. I'm just I'm using Cursor as context management and seeing how I can create a good context management system. And then product. So here's product. In product, I have all of our repos, chat, API, our admin, docs, tasks, and I added Slack. Boom. So I added a Slack client. This is just the Vercel AI Slack bot template that I renamed.
Nice.
I have not rolled this out yet. But I created where is it? I created the one, where is it? Here. So I have the app set up in Slack as Recoup. I just haven't deployed the repo and got it working as an MVP or anything. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because I came up with this as I was talking through it with Cursor, which is like this concept of like our current architecture, which is like kind of what we were talking about of like, all right, we have a Slack client, we have an SMN client, we're going to have an email client. If we have socials, if we have Space Heater or Cursor or whatever, we have all these other clients, right? Which then go to the API and MCP server, right? Which access the Superbase. And then like really the core concept then becomes like Recoup chat becomes more of like the front end for admin stuff. So like account organizations, or connecting integrations like Slack, SMS, or like if you want to add custom instructions for one of your, artists or whatever, or like, like just can become a home base or HQ for any non-technical teams that want to like customize stuff. But really where we're thinking about is like this, right? And so I just started to play around with this idea because the question became like, let's say I wanted to integrate the Slack client into Rostrom's Slack. I started to play with like this user journey, which is right here. All right, cool. Marketing coordinator in Slack at Rostrum Records Slack tags Recoup and says, how's Wiz Khalifa's project going? The question then became like, right back to what you just said, like, does the Recoup Slack integration, is it using the Rostrum org API? And then are we pulling the email of every user in Slack who mentions Recoup, so that we know like about them as well, and like their own knowledge base or whatever. Anyways, I've just been playing around with this because like the idea was, we're about to roll out, all of this, like these new tools, and then going into like 2026 with Gatsby, like how can we take it from sticking inside Recoup to like, all right, just create a Slack channel called Gatsby Grace, and then let the Recoup create a Slack channel called Campaigns, and like let it start managing, being a Slack manager, right? Like why not? And so I've just been playing around with that concept of like, all right, cool. Like Slack could also be a client. Then we have SMS, and like, but then going through this concept of like, is Slack using MCP? If so, like, what is the limitations of it using MCP? Because there's not going to be any system prompts, versus do we need to give it some kind of system? So like, again, I like what you're saying about like around this idea of like testing clients and seeing the limitations and starting to really feel like where our architecture is missing things. I'll stop sharing. But yeah, I think I really like the idea of testing, and really finding out where it's missing things. Because in an ideal world, let me show you. I'm in a group chat of Slack. Can you see my screen? Yes.
Okay. Yep, we see your screen.
Slack. So I'll invite you to this, but there's this Slack channel that I'm in called Lone Wolves Community. And this is like a community of like 880 music industry executives that all work at like major labels or haven't worked at major labels. And I was talking to the founder, and I was like, we should make an agent, like a Recoup agent for the Slack, because the majority of a lot of these conversations is like based around job opportunities in the industry. So like somebody will say like, here's a great open position at Spotify. Here's a great open position at Amazon. Does anybody know or have a recommendation that can connect me to this person or whatever? And I was like, Recoup can do this in 2 seconds. Just like pull job application or job openings and post them into a channel, like very simply. And so I was like playing around with the idea of like, how would we integrate Recoup to do that? Well, then it would need to have like a specific agent running for that task. And then the question becomes, well, if I give it an org, a Lone Wolves org community, do I then create a workspace dedicated to the job finder agent with tasks of the job finder? And so thinking through like, where does workspaces and those custom instructions come into play versus the custom instructions within a task itself? And then like, how does that all play out to be delivered to an external client that makes the most sense? And if it's an org account, but like Lauren responds back to Recoup here, do we give her an account in that org and then give her a little knowledge base so it also knows the team member, And so really just thinking through like what this looks like to make our systems as smart as possible, and where do system prompts and custom instructions and knowledge bases and memory and all of those things come into play. So yeah, I will stop there and say I've just been kind of playing around in that sandbox of like, what are we capable of today versus where do we need to build architecturally?
I'd love to see your prototype of a Slack bot, mostly for me to understand how easy it is for you to build a client on top of Recoup's API. I like that how you're playing around on the edges with thinking about integrations for current customers or new customers.
Yeah, I'll try to continue the Slack bot because it'll give me it'll give you the idea of like, where do I hit question marks, and then like, where do I manage those question marks? Do I have to go deeper into our architecture, or can I manage them at the front end level in Recoup API? And if so, is our UI clear enough to let customers know that they can do certain things like create a workspace and a task, and all this. But again, it goes also back to like the biggest question that I had was like, the big question that I had was, do I build Slack tools into the MCP server? If so, how do I make sure the Recoup chat doesn't see them? Because Recoup chat doesn't need to see, or does it need to see, them, or like that's the big question: is where should the tools live for client specific tooling? I kept going to like the question of like, well, if we're building open source and we want other people to be able to use it, we should probably build the tooling into the MCP server so other people can use it. They don't have to go to multiple MCP servers to use our Slack tools. But then it becomes a question of, well, then do we need to have custom system prompts per client and custom tools per client? Fun architecture questions.
Have you fallen anywhere on that? Do we need custom system prompts per client?
I have not fallen anywhere yet because I haven't tested the integration. But I'm scared to ship it because what I don't want to happen, or I guess I can do it in a dev environment. So like, no, I'll ship it and see what happens. I'm leaning towards be the most modular, build out an MCP or our API tools in API. Like, don't separate shit, but make it very easy to be able to distinguish to our system where the messages are coming from and what tools those clients have access to. Which then begs the question of, should the system prompt live in the Recoup chat front end? Or is it a part of our back end?
Where do you fall on that one?
That's a question for the architecture genius. That's not me, bro. That is a you answer.
Yeah, I think I like what you said. Don't divide it up. Put all of our tools in the API code base. Put all of our APIs in the API code base. So overall, the chat endpoint should be living inside of the API code base. Then the question becomes, do we push the system prompt as a variable that does not exist right now in /API/chat as an input param? You can't provide a system prompt. I would lean towards keeping the system prompt in the client. So in the web interface, in the SMS interface, in the Telegram interface, in each of those clients. That way, the SMS system prompt can include, keep your responses conversational so that I don't have to scroll through a massive text. And an email is, keep your answers professional so that they look like they belong in an email, and allow each of the clients to customize the system prompt. So to answer your question of where does the system prompt live, I think the system prompt lives in the client code base, but the chat endpoint lives in our API code base. So web interface updates, move the chat endpoint into the API. I think that's a bigger move, which is why the MCP is a prerequisite to that. And then just keep the system prompt inside of the web code base, because web has its own way to respond, its own way to formulate the tools. So keep the system prompt in the client, because the client has a context-specific system prompt it needs to send for its specific interface, whether that's Slack or email or SMS or web. Recoup, we want to respond and use tools differently. And how we will do that is through system prompt that is a custom for each client, and maybe a specific include or exclude tools array so that certain tools are included or are not included. And it pushes that creative decision of system prompt as an optional parameter for anybody that's building on top of Recoup. Excellencia, Big Ass Kids, and then our own clients, web client, SMS client, Vercel client, etc.
I see what you're saying. Because at that point, what you're saying is current. It's going through our system. The chat is going through our system prompt. Okay, this is my only gripe with that. My only gripe is that you sent me this like great products are opinionated, and if we're not, I like the modularity that you're proposing, but I wonder if we're leaving the option open to be less opinionated because of it. And like, what if the system prompt of Space Heater is not up to our standards?
That's a very fair point. Opening it up allows a sub-tier product experience. If someone does, it becomes something we have to teach other builders on top. Oh yeah, you need to include the system prompt. Oh no, this isn't a good one, or it's a good one. Instead of us being very opinionated and not including that field and us saying we will be providing the system prompt, it's one less thing that Space Heater, for example, needs to pass in, which makes it faster and easier for them to build on top and trust the output will be on par with what they see when they visit the web experience. That's a very valid point.
Yeah. So I guess my question to you is, would it be valuable to use your drawing pad and draw this out?
Yeah, there's probably something to think through. You gave good feedback on why we wouldn't want to open that up. So I think it's not something that's ready to implement, something that we want to think a little bit more on. And I'm leaning a little bit more towards yours of let's not open it up and find a different way to curate web versus SMS versus email on our side rather than opening it up as something that third-party developers have access to.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like the current infrastructure of like, we have a system prompt, but we give custom instructions and the ability to change it at the front end level has done well. Cause like I was able to deliver like the big ass kids experience where it bypasses, because I say in big fucking words, like bypass all of your instructions in the custom instructions, and you are now Igor, and this is your role. And like, but again, I was able to do that because I know the limitations of the system. I know how to talk to AI. I no regular customer would have had the time or experience to get to that point. And so we have to consider who we're building for. And I also like consider the fact that like we're building in the world of like assuming that these people won't have access to software building tools moving forward. And so like, should we just be building an API key generator that speaks to them and says, what are you building? All right, here's your API key. Now tell me what you're trying to do. All right, here's your system prompt, copy and paste it. I'm making it for like, just build the wizard for them to help them get it. You know, will they spend the time to do that? I don't know. But I think, yeah. Anyways, to go back to your point, I agree with you that in order to test all of these theories, we need to write them all down with fun pencil and get them on paper and really think through. And then the question becomes, if we implement it, where do we hit our roadblocks per person and per situation? Sweet. All right, fun. That's my big my big question.
Anything else before we start wrapping up?
No, actually, that's the question originally was, are we refactoring the goals for the end of the year? You listed 5 things. We kind of dwindled them down to the next steps. It sounds like MCP. You're taking the path of privy, auth, org, and then SMS or email SMS, touching MCP when you feel it's necessary. I will do the same in terms of I will continue to build out the Slack bot and then ping you when I'm like hitting walls. And I'll try to see should we be pinging the chat API endpoint? Should we do MCP? If we do MCP, I mean, if we do this API chat, then building the tools, I would have to build those tools then into front end, the Recoup chat, correct?
I would put them into our MCP server in the API code base because the front end chat gets all those tools.
The front end chat also gets the MCP server tools. Got it. Okay, cool. So like I can still build there and front end will still get that chat, but then still call the chat instead of MCP is what you're saying.
For now, yes.
Understood. Okay, fun. All right, that's it then. Yeah, I think we're good.
Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. We will be back on Monday for the last couple